They told him the zone was empty. No civilians. No survivors. No reason to go back. But through the smoke and collapsed streets, he heard it. A child crying. Then a woman whispering, "Please, don't let them find us." He had medals no one could name. Orders no one would admit existed. And the kind of training that made fear feel like a tool. So he did the one thing the mission didn't allow. He went in any way. Staff Sergeant Jack Riley was the kind of soldier people remembered without knowing why. He wasn't the loudest in the briefing room. He didn't tell big stories. He didn't collect attention. Yet when he walked into a space, the air changed, like everyone suddenly remembered they were mortal. Jack was 34, broad-shouldered but not bulky, with calm gray eyes that missed nothing. His uniform was always clean, not because he cared about appearance, but because he treated discipline like armor. Officially, he was reconnaissance, one of the best. Unofficially, nobody asked. Not after they'd heard the rumors. That he used to belong to a unit that didn't exist on paper. That he'd been inside places nobody was supposed to survive. That he had awards locked behind classified folders. Medals that came without ceremonies, pinned in quiet offices by men who never wrote emails. The other soldiers called him Ghost. Not because he was scary, because he moved like the world couldn't catch him. The city was called Karif, but most maps didn't bother labeling it anymore. It sat at the edge of a desert valley, half ruined, half burning, its skyline broken by artillery and time. The enemy had pushed into it days earlier, using civilians as cover and corridors as traps. Now the Allied command wanted one thing: control the route. If they could clear a narrow corridor through Karif, they could move humanitarian convoys and reinforcements. If they failed, the enemy would choke the valley and cut the front line in half. Jack's team, Bravo Recon, had one job: get eyes on enemy positions, mark anti-armor threats, identify safe movement lanes. No heroics. No contact unless necessary. In and out. That's what the maps said. But maps never mentioned the smell of burning plastic, or the way distant gunfire made the air feel nervous, or how a city could look empty and still be full of eyes. Jack crouched behind a broken wall, binoculars up, scanning rooftops. Beside him, Sergeant Tomas Vega muttered, "This place is a grave that hasn't finished eating." Private Eli Warren, the youngest, swallowed hard. Civilians really all gone? Lieutenant Renee Collins, their team lead, answered without looking away. Evac orders were issued. Doesn't mean everyone listened. Jack didn't speak. He was listening. And that was when he heard it. Not gunfire. Not vehicles. Something else. Thin. Fragile. A child's cry. Quickly cut off. Like someone covering a mouth. Jack's head turned slightly. "Did you hear that?" Warren whispered. Collins frowned. "Hear what?" Vega paused. Sounded like a kid. Jack slowly lowered his binoculars. The sound came again, faint, distant, but real. A small voice. Terrified. Alive. Collins' jaw tightened. "We're not here for civilian search." Jack stared into the ruin ahead. Somewhere, behind those collapsed apartments, a family was still breathing. And breathing in Karif meant you were running out of time. Back at the forward checkpoint, command was clear. Negative, the ops officer said when Collins reported the possible civilians. That sector is a hot pocket. We're not risking a recon team for unconfirmed non-combatants. Collins tried again. "Sir," it sounded like a child. "Recon's purpose is intelligence collection," the officer repeated, voice flat. "We have limited air cover, and we're expecting an enemy push. Do not divert resources." Jack stood behind Collins, hands still, face unreadable. The officer's tone softened, not kindly, strategically. "Lieutenant Collins, if you lose your team, you lose the corridor. If you lose the corridor, convoys stop. If convoys stop, more civilians die. Logic. Steel cold." Collins clenched her teeth. "Understood." The line clicked dead. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Vega murmured, "We walk away, we'll hear that kid in our sleep." Collins looked at Jack. Riley, don't. Jack met her eyes. He wasn't defiant. He wasn't dramatic. He just said, quietly, "We don't leave them." Colin's voice sharpened. "We were ordered." Jack nodded. "I know." Then, Jack's gaze didn't move. "I'm going." Silence. Warren whispered, "Alone." Jack turned to him. "You stay? All of you. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, you tell command you never saw me leave." Colin's eyes flashed. "Jack, that's a career-ending move." Jack's expression softened, just a fraction. "I've already got medals I can't wear," he said. "I'm not worried about my career." Then he checked his rifle, secured his comms, and walked toward the broken city. Not like a man chasing glory, like a man answering a debt. Kharif swallowed him quickly. The streets were narrow, clogged with debris. Sand drifted through bullet holes. Smoke crawled along the ground like a living thing. Jack moved low, fast, and silent, shadowing walls, crossing open gaps in short bursts, pausing to listen. The crying came again. Closer now. He followed it through a shattered courtyard where a fountain had been turned into a crater, past an overturned bus, past a doorway marked by old children's handprints in paint. Then, movement. 3 enemy fighters emerged from a side alley, laughing, rifles loose in their hands. One carried a radio. Another carried a bag that clinked like ammunition. Jack froze in a doorway, pressing into shadow. The men passed within 5 meters. He could have killed them. Easy. But killing them would be loud, and loud would bring more. Jack waited until their footsteps faded. Then he moved again. He found the building by accident, because of the silence. In a city full of echoes, one apartment block sat too still. No smoke. No distant voices. No dogs. Just stillness. Jack approached the entrance and saw why. A crude wire trap ran across the doorway. He cut it carefully, then slipped inside. The hallway smelled like dust and fear. A whisper floated from the stairwell above. "Please don't." A woman's voice. Jack climbed. Slow. Quiet. Controlled. At the second-floor landing, he saw the door slightly open. And through the crack, he saw a woman, young, dirty-faced, holding 2 children close, her hands shaking as she tried to keep them silent. Her eyes locked onto his. Instant panic. She raised a kitchen knife like it could stop a war. Jack lifted one hand, palm open. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." The woman's lips trembled. Are you real?" Jack nodded once. "Yes." One child, a girl maybe 6, clung to her mother's shirt. The other, a boy younger, had tear tracks cutting through dust on his cheeks. The woman whispered, "They're outside. They keep coming back." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "Men," she said. "They search buildings. They take people." Jack felt his jaw tighten. He looked at the window. Down below, the street was empty, right now. But right now didn't mean safe. Jack whispered, "We're leaving." Quietly. "Now." The woman swallowed, shaking. "We can't. My son, he can't run fast." Jack crouched to the boy's level. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The boy stared at him, eyes wide. "Samir," the child whispered. Jack nodded. "Okay, Samir. I'll carry you." The boy blinked. "You promise?" Jack's voice was steady. "I promise." The mother's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know you," she whispered. "Why would you?" Jack looked at her. "Because someone once went back for me," he said. "And I'm still here because of it." Jack didn't have the luxury of a full plan. He had a building full of fear, a street full of enemies, and a timeline measured in footsteps. He listened, head slightly tilted, breathing slowed, until he caught it. Boots. Not running. Not rushing. Patrolling. The kind of movement that said the enemy felt comfortable here. He looked at the mother again. Her hands trembled around the knife, like it was the last thing keeping the universe from collapsing. "What's your name?" Jack asked. She hesitated. "Layla." "Layla," he said calmly. "I need you to do exactly what I say. Not because I'm in charge. Because it keeps your kids alive." Layla's eyes darted to the stairwell, then back to him. "Okay." Jack knelt and checked the boy's shoes. too loose. He tightened the laces quickly, then slid his own spare cord from his pocket and looped it through the girl's shoes too, tying them snug. "What's her name?" he asked. Layla whispered. "Mina." Mina stared at Jack as if he wasn't a soldier. He was a myth, something that wasn't supposed to exist. Jack turned his pack around and opened a side pouch. He pulled out a small, soft protein bar and broke it in half, offering the pieces to the kids. "Eat," he whispered, quietly. Layla's lips trembled again. We haven't eaten since yesterday." Jack's jaw tightened. He didn't answer with words. He answered by making it real. Food first, panic later. Then he moved to the window, peeked through cracked glass. Down below, the alley was still empty. But far at the corner of the main street, he saw two enemy fighters turning their heads, scanning buildings with slow confidence. They weren't searching randomly anymore. They were sweeping. Jack's radio crackled softly in his ear, his team checking in, unaware of the storm about to hit. He didn't answer. Not yet. He looked at Layla. "How far is the nearest safe zone?" she whispered. Jack stared out at the ruins. "Far," he said. "But possible." Layla swallowed. "They're everywhere." Jack glanced back at her children, then leaned closer. "Listen to me," he said. "They're everywhere for people who move like victims." Layla blinked. Jack's eyes stayed calm, steady enough to lend her some of his steadiness. "We move like we belong," he said. "We move like we have a plan." Layla's voice broke. "We don't." Jack's expression didn't change. "Yes," he said quietly. "We do." They left the apartment the way Jack entered it, quiet, controlled, invisible. Jack took Mina's hand with his left, kept his rifle low in his right. Layla carried Samir's small backpack, empty except for a scarf and a toy car missing one wheel. Jack had offered to carry it. Layla refused. "I can carry something," she whispered, like it was a promise she needed to make to herself. Jack didn't argue. At the stairwell, they paused. Voices drifted in from outside. Enemy voices, close. Jack lifted 2 fingers. "Wait." Layla pressed both children into her coat, her arms wrapping them like armor. Footsteps approached the building entrance. Jack's mind ran quick math. If they entered, he could kill them. But then more would come, and Layla and the kids would be trapped in a gunfight. He needed them to pass. He leaned toward Layla and whispered, "No sound. Even if you want to cry." Layla nodded, eyes glassy. The footsteps stopped directly below them. A voice spoke in broken local dialect, laughing. Then another voice answered. Jack caught fragments. "No one left." "Check anyway. Commander wants bodies." "Bodies." Jack's grip tightened. The door downstairs creaked. Someone stepped into the lobby. Jack's muscles tightened, but his face stayed still. The enemy soldier moved slowly across the lobby, boots crunching broken glass. He paused under the stairwell, so close Jack could smell smoke and sweat on him. Mina's breath hitched. Layla's hand flew to the girl's mouth, gently covering it. The soldier lingered for a long second. Then he spat on the floor, muttered something annoyed, and walked back out. The door creaked again. Footsteps faded. Jack waited 3 full heartbeats after silence returned. Then he moved. "Now," he whispered. They descended. When they reached the lobby, Jack crouched by the doorway and peeked out. The street was still clear, but he knew something else now. The enemy's sweep had started, and the net was tightening. They moved through the alleys, shadow to shadow, ruin to ruin. Jack guided them between collapsed walls and half-standing courtyards, using the city like a maze he'd been born inside. The children tried to be brave, but fear has a weight. It made Mina stumble. It made Samir cling to Layla's sleeve like a lifeline. Jack slowed his pace, kept them steady. "Look at me," he whispered to Mina. "When I stop, you stop. When I go, you go. Like a game." Mina's eyes widened. "A game?" Jack nodded. "A quiet game. Winners go home." Mina swallowed, then nodded hard. They reached a narrow street lined with burned-out cars. Jack froze. A shadow shifted at the far end. An enemy fighter stepped into view, rifle slung, cigarette glowing. Jack pulled the group back into a doorway instantly. Layla's breath turned sharp. The fighter stopped, scanning the street lazily. He was between them and the corridor Jack needed. Jack's mind tightened into that special clarity that combat training carved into him. He saw angles, timing, sound, risk. He looked behind them. Another route existed, but it would take longer, and time was bleeding out. Jack touched Layla's arm and whispered, "Stay here. Don't move." Layla's eyes went wide. "Where are you going?" Jack's voice was quiet. "To make a door." He stepped out and moved low along the wall, silent. The enemy fighter turned slightly, exhaling smoke, looking bored. Jack closed distance like a shadow. At 2 meters, he struck, one hand clamping the man's mouth, the other driving a knife up beneath the ribs. The fighter's body stiffened. Jack held him until the fight left his limbs. Then he lowered the body behind a car, covered it with debris, and wiped his blade on the man's jacket. No gunshot. No alarm. Jack returned to Layla. She stared at him, trembling. Mina didn't understand what happened. But Samir did. He whispered, "Did you?" Jack crouched in front of him. "I stopped someone bad," Jack said gently. "That's all." Samir nodded slowly, as if accepting that some truths were too heavy for children. Layla whispered, You're not just recon." Jack didn't answer. He only said, "We move." The most dangerous part of any escape wasn't combat. It was the moments when you had to cross open ground and trust that the world wouldn't notice you. Jack led them to an intersection where 2 main streets cut through the city like scars. The open stretch was 30 meters of broken pavement. 30 meters that could turn into a cemetery. He peeked. Listened. Far away, engines. Closer, voices. He timed the next noise, a distant explosion from another neighborhood, drawing attention away. "On my count," he whispered. Layla held Mina's hand. Samir held Layla's coat. Jack counted silently with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. They ran. Mina's breath came fast. Layla moved like she was carrying the whole world. Halfway across, an enemy voice shouted from a balcony. "Hey!" Jack didn't look up. He shoved the group forward and spun, raising his rifle. 2 enemy fighters appeared, startled. Jack fired 2 suppressed shots. Both dropped. But the balcony man yelled again, louder, panic turning into an alarm. More footsteps erupted. Jack grabbed Layla's shoulder and pushed them behind a concrete slab. "Stay down," he hissed. Layla clutched the children, eyes wide with terror. Jack leaned out and saw them. Enemy fighters spilling into the street, scanning for targets. One of them had a radio. Jack knew that was the real danger. Not the gun, but the call. He fired again, hit the radio man first, then pulled back. But now the city was awake, and it was hunting them. Jack finally keyed his comms. One short, encrypted burst to his team. "Bravo, Recon. This is Riley." Colin's voice snapped in instantly. "Riley? Where the hell are you?" Jack kept his voice calm. "I found civilians. Mother and 2 kids. I'm moving them to the corridor." Silence. Then Vega swore softly. "You actually did it." Colin's tone turned sharp. "Jack, you were ordered not to." "I know," Jack cut in. "Enemy is sweeping. I need a diversion on the south block. 2 minutes. Then I need a pickup near the old clinic ruins. Can you do it?" Collins hesitated. Not because she didn't want to. Because she knew what answering meant. She'd be complicit in breaking orders. But then her voice hardened into decision. "Copy," she said. "You get them out. We'll make noise." Jack exhaled. "Thank you." Collins replied, quieter, "Don't thank me. Just don't die." The comm clicked. Layla stared at Jack. "You have people?" Jack nodded. "Yes." Layla's voice shook. "Will they help us?" Jack looked at her children, then back at the burning street. "They will," he said, "because they're still soldiers." The diversion hit like thunder. Explosions rolled from the south block. Gunfire erupted. Enemy fighters turned their heads, uncertain, drawn toward the noise like moths toward flame. Jack seized the moment. "Move," he whispered. They ran through a narrow alley, past a collapsed market stall, under a hanging power line that's sparking in the wind. Mina stumbled. Jack caught her instantly, lifting her for 3 seconds, just enough to clear the rubble, then set her down. "You're doing great," he whispered. Mina nodded, lips trembling. Samir's legs began to fail, tiny lungs burning. Jack scooped him up with one arm, rifle in the other, continuing at a jog. Layla watched him with a mixture of fear and awe. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered again, almost pleading for an answer she could believe. Jack didn't slow. "Because you're not collateral," he said. "You're people." They reached the clinic ruins, half a building, crushed by shelling. It should have been empty, but the enemy had chosen it too. Jack saw 3 silhouettes inside, rifles up, waiting, like they expected someone to run here. They weren't reacting to the diversion. They were waiting for this exact move. Jack's blood turned to ice. He shoved Layla and the kids behind a broken wall. "Stay low," Layla whispered. "What?" Jack didn't answer. He checked his last magazine. Then he moved forward. Alone. Because that's what he had always done. The clinic had once been a place of healing. Now it was a trap. Jack slid along the cracked wall, heart steady, mind silent. The 3 enemy fighters inside the ruined building weren't amateurs. Their spacing was wrong for looters, too deliberate. They expected movement from the alley. They expected him. Jack slowed his breathing. Fear was useless here. Only timing mattered. He lifted a small device from his vest, an old flash charge, modified, quiet. One of the few things he still carried from a unit whose name was never spoken. He rolled it through a broken doorway. 1 heartbeat. 2. The flash detonated. Not loud, not dramatic. Just light and pressure. Jack moved. He entered low, rifle up, eyes already mapping the room. The first fighter was still blinking, disoriented. Jack struck him with the butt of the rifle, dropping him without a sound. The second tried to raise his weapon. Jack fired once, controlled, final. The third was faster. The man dove behind a desk, firing blindly. Rounds shattered plaster. Jack dropped, rolled, came up on one knee, and fired again. Silence followed. The clinic breathed dust. Jack stood still for a second, listening for more footsteps. None came. The diversion was still pulling attention south. He turned back to the doorway. "Now," he hissed. Layla ran first, clutching Mina's hand. Jack scooped Samir again without breaking stride. They crossed the clinic, through the rear wall blown open by artillery, into a narrow service corridor. Jack felt the city pushing back, gunfire growing closer, shouts echoing. But then, a different sound. Engines. Heavy. Friendly. Jack's radio crackled. "Ghost." Vega's voice came through, strained but alive. "We've got the corridor. Smoke out. You've got 30 seconds. Jack didn't slow. He burst through the final opening into a street, choked with white smoke. Armored vehicles loomed ahead. Friendly silhouettes waved them in, weapons covering angles with disciplined precision. A hand grabbed Jack's shoulder. "Move. Move." Jack shoved Layla forward. The kids were pulled inside a transport. Jack followed last, spinning and firing 2 final shots to keep heads down. The ramp slammed shut. The vehicle surged forward. And just like that, Karif fell behind them. The transport rattled as it accelerated toward the secured zone. Inside, it was quiet. Not because there was nothing to say, but because nobody knew how to say it. Layla sat on a bench, holding her children. Mina leaned against her shoulder, exhausted. Samir slept with his head on Jack's chest, breathing slow and steady for the first time in days. Layla looked at Jack, really looked at him now. "You didn't have to," she whispered. Jack didn't look down at her. "Yes," he said. "I did." She swallowed. "What's your name?" Jack hesitated. Names mattered. Then he said it anyway. "Jack." Layla nodded, like she was memorizing it. "Jack," she said quietly, "when my children are grown, I will tell them there was a man who walked into hell so they could walk out." Jack closed his eyes, and for a moment, the ghosts in his head were quiet. Command wasn't pleased. They never were, when rules bent. Jack stood in a small operations room, hands clasped behind his back. Across from him sat a colonel, flanked by two officers with tablets full of reports. "You disobeyed a direct order," the colonel said. "Yes, sir." "You compromised a recon mission." "Yes, sir." "You engaged multiple enemy combatants outside mission parameters." "Yes, sir." The colonel stared at him for a long moment. Then he tapped the screen. "And yet," he said slowly, "you delivered live intelligence, preserved the corridor, and evacuated 3 civilians, including 2 minors, without losing a single Allied soldier." Jack didn't speak. The colonel leaned back. "You know why this is complicated?" Jack answered honestly. "Because if you punish me, you admit civilians matter. And if you reward me, you admit the rules aren't perfect." The colonel's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You really were in that unit, weren't you?" Jack said nothing. The colonel sighed. "Dismissed." Jack turned to leave. "Sergeant," the colonel added. Jack stopped. "This doesn't go in the press," the colonel said. "No ceremony. No citation." Jack nodded. "Understood." "But," the colonel continued, "it will go where it belongs." He slid a small black case across the table. Jack recognized it immediately. Inside was a medal, unmarked, unnumbered. The kind given when the country wanted to say thank you without saying anything at all. Jack closed the case. "Yes, sir." Weeks later, Jack stood at the edge of a humanitarian camp on the outskirts of the safe zone. Layla spotted him first. She rushed over, children in tow. Mina ran to him without fear now, wrapping her arms around his leg. Samir smiled up at him like soldiers smiled at pilots when the jets arrived overhead. Layla held back tears. "We're being relocated," she said. "Somewhere safe. School. Food." Jack nodded. "Good." She hesitated, then pressed something into his hand. It was the toy car, cleaned, fixed. The missing wheel replaced. "For you," Samir said. "So you remember us." Jack's throat tightened. "I won't forget," he said. He watched them walk away. 3 lives continuing because someone broke a rule. Jack turned back toward the horizon. The desert wind carried dust and distant noise. Another mission would come. Another order. Another choice. And Jack would make it the same way he always did. Not for medals. Not for rank. But because sometimes the most heroic act in war is choosing who gets to live. Some heroes don't stand on stages. They walk away quietly, carrying the lives they saved with them forever. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Epic Recon Stories. Here we tell the missions that never made the headlines, the decisions made in silence, and the people who carried them. More stories are coming soon.